You're watching CBS 12 News, the one to turn to.
It is a rainy Memorial Day. This video just taken near Australian Avenue in Mangonia Park shows just how flooded roadways can get. Our crew's telling us that a car crashed into a water pump, creating this mess on the road. Waters are high, but cars can still drive through. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Liz Quirantes.
And I'm Jim Grimes. Most of us are used to spending today in the sunshine, celebrating with cookouts, maybe even parades and gatherings.
Unfortunately, with the mix of coronavirus and the weather, none of that happened today. Chief Meteorologist Erin Christensen joins us now. She is tracking all the rounds of rain as well as a tropical wave, Erin.
Yeah, the moral of the story here is if you don't have to venture out on the roads tonight, don't. Stay in place. We have a slew of flooded areas, watches and warnings. And now this wave, this tropical wave that is smack dab over Florida has caught the attention of the National Hurricane Center. And they've now given it a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours. So over the next 2 days, as this lifts to the northeast, this would be the area where we would potentially see this system pick up a name. In the short term, we're still watching this wave rotating through the peninsula, and we do have a flood advisory that has been extended along the entire I-95 corridor through Palm Beach County, Jupiter, West Palm Beach, Lake Worth, all the way down through Boynton Beach, Delray Beach. We do have that flood advisory that continues through the course of the evening. So what this means is that you're going to see some standing water on the roads. You never want to drive through that. You can't quite tell just how deep the water is. And in some cases, the road may have been compromised beneath that. Again, this heavy rain is going to continue through the course of the evening, and we're going to track hour by hour what we're expecting tonight and tomorrow coming up.
Thanks, Erin. Well, the rain really coming down to our south as well. This is video of flooding in Miami today. You can see cars driving through deep water slowly and carefully.
What weather forcing a lot of us to who were eager to enjoy the beach to, well, do other plans instead.
Our area saw rain all weekend, causing some local flooding for the Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County. Our Stephanie Valderrama joins us with a look at the conditions outside.
Rain, rain, and more rain. That's what we're seeing out here. The exact opposite of the perfect beach day. But after weeks of being stuck inside, some people were not going to let the bad weather keep them indoors.
Memorial Day was a washout. Rain drenched South Florida all weekend long. We drove around Palm Beach County. Standing water covered many roads in low-lying areas. But Floridians were trying to make the best of the less than ideal weather, like these visitors at Riviera Beach. In Boynton Beach, surfers rode the waves. Even the youngest braved the rough waters.
The choppy water, I don't really like it that much. I like the glassy waves because they're easier to ride for me. So I just decided to swim out there and be with my dad.
The rain is expected to continue, so keep in mind that all it takes is just 2 feet of water to pick up a car and carry it away. Stephanie Valderrama, CBS 12 News.
And despite the rain and the coronavirus pandemic, a small group gathering this Memorial Day at South Florida's National Cemetery.
The large Memorial Day service was canceled, but a small private ceremony was held to honor our nation's fallen heroes. CBS 12's Danielle Wall was there and shows us how this year is so different from any other.
This Memorial Day service at the South Florida National Cemetery typically draws thousands of people. This year they could only have about a dozen, but still the emotions of the day were very strong. They still played taps, laid a wreath, and gave a 21-gun salute. Congressman Brian Mast was the keynote speaker for a small ceremony recorded by the National Cemetery and posted online. The VA secretary canceled large gatherings due to the coronavirus pandemic, but people still found ways to quietly honor the fallen. Some wore masks, others stood 6 feet apart. And while Congressman Mast recently appealed to the VA secretary to allow public gatherings this Memorial Day, he says he understands the decision to keep things small and private due to health and safety concerns. No matter how much had to change this year, he says the emotions of the day are still the same.
We've all lost a lot of friends. And you think about it, especially on a day like this, you really think about it when you hear taps. 21 gun salute. It's, I don't know, I guess just makes my cup overflow a little bit on this day. I've heard it too many times.
The cemetery is still open for individuals and small groups to pay their respects. Volunteer groups that typically put American flags at each headstone weren't able to do it this year. Congressman Mast hopes next year a large ceremony can happen again. At the South Florida National Cemetery, Danielle Waugh, CBS 12 News.
President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence also took part in the annual wreath-laying ceremony over at the Arlington National Cemetery this morning. Both paid their respects to the nation's fallen heroes at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, along with his wife Jill, they laid a wreath over at the Delaware Veterans Memorial Park. They were joined by about a dozen veterans. Senator Biden has yet to publicly leave his home since mid-March. That's when the presidential campaign came to a stop because of the pandemic.
Every decision being made to counter the coronavirus certainly affects lives, but also could alter President Trump's political future. A series of recent polls have Joe Biden in the lead by around 5%.
And that will be the biggest factor moving forward. That's the question. Sinclair Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman has more now from Washington.
What was the raucous campaign trail replaced mostly by basement webcasts and task force briefings instead. And unpredictably, a virus became the dominant topic. How President Trump handles the crisis may determine his fate.
It is not an easy time to be the president of the United States. Obviously, the coronavirus has changed things quite a bit for us, but the message still is about jobs, is about the economy.
Multiple recent polls show Joe Biden leading by a handful of points. Many concerned Trump is risking lives to assure a better economy.
There's no such thing as a pure single issue election. But there is almost always a defining theme.
Like he says in 2004, when George W. Bush's re-election was based in large part on the war on terror.
If our society reopens well and people are feeling euphoric come September and October, the president will be very happy with election night. If we have a massive second wave of pandemic-related deaths this fall, then the president may suffer a defeat somewhat like Herbert Hoover in 1932.
For Biden, though, since he doesn't get to call the shots, his biggest move may be in the messaging, going after unenthused voters and those who had been behind his biggest rival.
What Joe is going to have to do, and he's beginning to move in that direction, is to say to those working class people, say to those young people, say to those minorities, listen, I understand your situation.
And when there is more of a reopening, that will change the race in another way, too, since Trump and Biden will be able to campaign more freely on the road again. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
The World Health Organization is hitting pause on studying hydroxychloroquine as a potential COVID-19 treatment. The decision was made after an observational study was published in the medical journal The Lancet on Friday, described how seriously ill hospitalized COVID-19 patients treated with hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine were more likely to die. President Donald Trump, who was taking the medication to protect himself from the virus, says he has now stopped. The WHO's Director General says an independent executive group is now reviewing the use of hydroxychloroquine in the Solidarity trial.
Well, we have new numbers about just how hard hit the nation's aging population has been by the coronavirus. The percentage of cases in nursing home and long-term care facilities is high, but the percentage of deaths we now know is staggering. Sinclair National Correspondent Christine Frizzell has more.
From reports of 17 bodies piled up in one New Jersey nursing home to others of family and friends unable to say goodbye as loved ones die alone. One of the most alarming aspects of the coronavirus crisis has been how hard it's hit America's nursing homes and long-term care facilities. We now know in a large number of states, the percentage of COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes hovers around 50% of the total statewide deaths, but some are much higher. In Minnesota, 81% of the deaths occurred in long-term care facilities, 77% in New Hampshire, 78% in Rhode Island, and 70% in Connecticut.
nobody really fully understood how vicious this virus would be. You know, nursing homes do infection control. They deal with the flu every single year, and they do it well. This virus is like nothing we've seen before.
In Maryland, where the latest numbers show COVID-19 deaths at long-term care facilities now at 54%, the state's attorney general says they've learned a startling lesson about those who care for America's elderly.
The staff, who are often very underpaid, are working in different facilities. So they have more opportunities to contract the virus and more opportunities to spread it.
Brian Frosch says more than 2 months in, nursing homes are still far behind and blames the federal government for a lack of coordination during this national emergency.
The federal government should have acquired, contracted for tests, PPE. They should have made it available to the states in great quantities.
For the last 30 years, the federal government has played a significant role in setting standards and completing oversight for nursing homes in this country. But throughout this crisis, advocates say it's largely been left up to the states, who are often competing with one another for supplies and resources. Some advocates worry about what's ahead, with all 50 states now reopened in some capacity.
As cities and states open up, our providers are left to compete with grocery stores and nail salons and gyms for PPE to keep their staff safe.
One of the many signs the road ahead for this country's most vulnerable could be a long one. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
As the nation pushes to get back to normal, transportation is a big concern for many.
Yeah, will it be safe to ride the nation's mass transit systems? That's coming up next at 6.